Good morning and Merry Christmas. This is The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week discussing topical issues with some interesting guests, and another one lined up for today.
Well, and Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you.
Yes, we do have Tom Price, the Senior Vice President from Chesapeake Energy. He's going to talk to us about the oil and gas business in Oklahoma and nationally and internationally, about the state of it, what's happening in it, what do companies, independent companies like Chesapeake and the others that are strong here in Oklahoma, what kind of future do they have? What kind of problems do they face? Tom has been in the business many years and is quite an articulate guest. We're really pleased to have him to talk about one of the fundamental businesses that's important to Oklahomans.
Chesapeake is making a large impact on the state of Oklahoma. We'll find more about it. Tom Price with Chesapeake Energy, our guest today on The Verdict.
For one Oklahoma-based company, success didn't happen overnight. Initially, the days were long, 80-hour weeks common. As we grew, we wanted to share our success, and the ideals of corporate and civic responsibility found a welcome home. Today, we're the largest investor in the Sooner State, and a source for exciting, new, high-quality jobs. We're Chesapeake Energy, committed to building a better Oklahoma.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
Hi, I'm Court Diffie. With all of the change that has taken place in the car industry in the past decade here in Oklahoma, it's hard to find a family-run business anymore. One of the things that makes us different, that if you visit any one of our 3 locations, you're going to find one of our family members there ready to help you. Does that really make any difference? We really believe it does. So I invite you to come out and experience the Diffie family difference and decide for yourself.
You need this one to get satellite HD. This one's your DVR. This one's for local channels. This one's...
What are we supposed to do with all this stuff?
Got you covered. Oh, by the way, that old satellite stuff makes a great end table.
That doesn't look so bad, right, honey?
Don't live in satellite denial. Get the latest entertainment without the hassles from Cox, your friend in the digital age.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers, as always, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Yeah, we are very pleased today to have with us Tom Price. Tom is the Senior Vice President, Investor and Governmental Relations for Chesapeake Energy. He's a graduate of UCO, Oklahoma University, and the American Graduate School of International Management. He's been affiliated with Chesapeake for approximately 15 years. He has been active in the oil and gas business in Oklahoma longer than that. But this is his first appearance on The Verdict. I hope not his last. Tom, welcome.
Thank you very much.
We're glad to have you.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Tom, go over your title with the company and your role with the company.
Okay, at the risk of immediately being controversial, the title is actually Senior Vice President of Corporate Development. And what that means is that I'm responsible for government affairs, public relations, community relations, media relations, anything that is not putting a drill bit in the ground and getting oil and gas back out from it. I try to facilitate our ability to have the kind of relationship with legislators, with any constituent interest that would help us in getting wells drilled, in having a positive impact in the community.
In some of your marketing, I've seen the term largest investor in the state of Oklahoma. What does that mean?
Well, it means that on a annual basis, we spend more, about over $1 billion a year in Oklahoma, creating jobs, drilling wells, And we have not been able to find anyone else that is making that kind of investment here at home in Oklahoma. There are a lot of great companies, but most of those companies spend their dollars elsewhere. We spend the preponderance of our dollars right here in Oklahoma.
Tom, most Oklahomans are familiar with Chesapeake, at least by name, but they may not be familiar with how it got started.
Right.
Could you tell us about how Aubrey Mcclendon and Tom Ward got together and started Chesapeake?
Sure.
How did that happen?
Well, a couple of young guys, they were both landmen. One from Oklahoma University, that is Tom Ward, actually lived in Sealing as a young man. Aubrey grew up in Oklahoma City, went to Duke, came back from school about the same time, and decided they were going to get in the oil and gas business. It was not a particularly good time, 1983, so Penn Square had already failed. But they said, there's room for tenacious, smart, creative young men in any business. And so they began Chesapeake on a handshake. It was a partnership. And they worked together really for 6 years until we became an operating company in 1989. And so they've been together now, over 20 years, 22 years.
And I guess Aubrey's the chief executive officer.
He is.
And Tom is?
The chief operating officer.
Okay. Tell us about Chesapeake's size in any way you want to describe it. Employees, revenues, however you would choose to describe it.
Well, let me describe it this way if I could. We started the company in 1989 with 9 people and $50,000. And we now employ about 2,700 to 2,800 and have an enterprise value, that is the value of our equity value in the market, and our debt is about 18 to 20 billion. So we've grown a lot from a very small tenant in 3 Chop Square there at Western and about 61st Street to now having that 3 Chop Square be Chesapeake's Oklahoma City campus. So, it's something that we are just all enormously excited about and honored to be having an impact in Oklahoma like we are.
Let me ask you a follow-up to that, if I may. I have driven by on a number of occasions the campus, the Chesapeake campus, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, it's obvious that the company has spent an awful lot of money to make that a very pretty, aesthetically beautiful place. Why did Chesapeake think that was important instead of just having a plain old office building?
Well, in our business, first of all, there are not enough geologists, engineers, geophysicists, landmen to go around. If you want to attract the best and brightest of those, you have to have a competitive advantage. And for us, we think there are enough tall, nondescript buildings around where they are stratified, where you've got engineers all on one floor and landmen on another, and the senior management up here on the top. We just felt like that wasn't the proper way to speak to what we think the Chesapeake culture is, which is every single one of us working hard for a common goal. And we think if we're trying to recruit the best and brightest from Houston, from Denver, from Dallas, from other places, that we want to have a working environment that is second to none. I laugh with some of my legislative friends. Our campus is our Quality Jobs Act. Yeah. That's people like to be a part of an environment like that.
Mm-hmm. What is your primary business mission? How would you describe it?
Well, it really is pretty simple. We want to find as much clean, onshore natural gas as we can find, and we like to say that we are a PIMBY operator rather than a NIMBY. If you hear the term NIMBY, the not in my backyard, we like the term PIMBY, which is please in my backyard. So we try and drill in those areas in Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, where there's been drilling that's gone on for 100 years, where people have said, we understand the importance of oil and gas, we understand exploration, we understand its value for the community.
And you drill in a lot of the rural areas. People know about your presence here in Oklahoma City, but really you have a statewide effort.
Oh yeah, I mean, you will not go by our campus and find a rig drilling anywhere close. As a matter of fact, that's why we are so much engaged across the state with our charitable efforts, with our mentoring programs at our field offices, various things. The jobs that we create more of than any, frankly, are in rural Oklahoma than they are in Oklahoma City. Different types of jobs, but still very well paying in those particular communities. And, we think that that there's probably no other company in the state that has been as focused on developing Oklahoma's rural assets, at least in the oil and gas business, than we have.
There may be a very logical, simple answer to this, but I heard you say onshore drilling as opposed to offshore.
Right,
gas.
right.
Why is it that Chesapeake has focused there?
Well, the genesis of our company was in Oklahoma and was drilling deep, typically advanced technology wells, horizontal or high angle wells. You can just get many more wells drilled onshore and get them hooked up and selling gas quickly than you can if you're in the waters of the Gulf. The shallow waters have been over-drilled, really. The deep water, you can spend $50 to $100 million on a single well, and it can be 5 to 10 years before the well begins producing. In a situation like we've got now with natural gas prices above $14, we need to be drilling as many wells as we can and getting that production to market as quickly as possible. So we try to stay focused on shore.
We're visiting with Tom Price with Chesapeake Energy. You're watching The Verdict, and we'll be right back.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
And Blankenship has stopped at the line of scrimmage. No gain on the play. Leaving it 4th and 7 on the Tiger 46-yard line. 38 seconds on the clock. The Tigers have no choice but to go for it. Wiggins had to do the kicking. Here's the snap. And the kick is away.
RSM McGladry. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. RSM McGladry. In Oklahoma City, the phone number is 405-843-5311.
Hockey is back, and it's on the Cox Channel. The Oklahoma Ford Turnpike Series features the Oilers and the Blazers exclusively on the Cox Channel. Whether it's in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, you're covered with the Cox Channel.
Merry Christmas, the rookie Jared Barraza.
Nobody does more sports. Nobody does it better. The Cox Channel is home to the Oklahoma Ford Turnpike Series. Game on.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're visiting with Tom Price of Chesapeake Energy.
Tom, all of us experienced the high gasoline prices of the third quarter of 2005 and saw the price around $3 in Oklahoma and I guess higher elsewhere. Then we saw the congressional hearings about the big oil company executives coming before Congress and explaining third quarter profits being very high. What's your take on that? Was that an unusual spike? Did Chesapeake experience the same kind of earnings? Just how do you evaluate that situation?
Well, it's difficult to answer that in a way that is palatable to a lot of consumers. We are in a position in this country that we have invested too much in assets that consume energy and not enough in assets that produce energy. And we really saw that in the decade of the 90s. We haven't built any refineries in a quarter century. When you have weather phenomena like we had with Katrina, if you have a very cold winter, if you have a very hot summer, you're going to stress the system. There is not enough natural gas that's produced in the U.S. And certainly not enough oil that's produced to be able to meet all of the daily demands, and then on top of that, the demands caused by significant spikes in either cooling demand or heating demand. And a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that natural gas is being used to a great degree because of the insistence of the federal government. They wanted to use a clean fuel, so they're using natural gas to fire cogen electric plants. That has put a tremendous amount of stress on the system, and we just have to, I think, all work together rather than pointing fingers at each other. You know, this process has gone on for a long, long time. During the decade of the 90s, oil prices averaged about $10, and natural gas prices averaged about $2. If oil companies were able to control prices, a little bit difficult to explain why we would have gone through a decade when prices were at $10 and gas was at $2. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the answer is that I think this is a very difficult business. In 1997, there were 46 mid and large size independent oil and gas companies. There are 16 now, so 30 have been absorbed or consolidated just because the capital costs for these companies is just prohibitive.
I heard one explanation that made some sense to me, and that was like it or not with Katrina and with the other pressures on the production.
Right.
That's a free market at work. And heaven knows we want the free market and we want it to work. And that's exactly, sometimes it doesn't always work the way we like for it to, but that was the free market at work.
Yeah, you know, I will say this, that the free market is a pretty blunt tool.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it doesn't always give us the answer that we want. I am working right now with leaders in the legislature, because those of us in the oil and gas industry think that it's proper that we try to help those that are not going to be able to deal with the issues of rising heating costs. Gross production tax, which is the tax that we pay as a percentage of revenues, not income, but 7%. Right. And in the 1990s, that gross production tax was about $350 million a year. In fiscal 05, just passed, that ended June 30th, oil and gas companies paid $850 million in Oklahoma in gross production taxes. By my calculations, in fiscal 06, the one we're in now, that'll be $1 billion. So I think that there needs to really be some serious consideration of some enhancement of the LIHEAP fund, which will provide additional dollars to those people that are not able to afford to take care of heating their homes.
We hear the term independent oil and gas business. Some of our viewers may not be familiar with the term independent as it applies to this business. Explain that.
Yeah, really independent just merely means predominantly in one sector of the business. That is, for Chesapeake, we are exclusively in the exploration and production. We have no downstream operations. In other words, we have no refineries, we have no retail operations, and that is different, obviously, from the Exxons, Chevrons, ConocoPhillips, and those companies that are diversified.
What are the trends for your sector of the business?
The trends are to get bigger, number one, because if you don't have scale, you just cannot be involved in the types of projects that are attracting companies and, that have really the opportunity to be able to respond to rising consumer demand. As I mentioned, there's so many of these companies that have been acquired since 1997. It continues to go on now. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that ConocoPhillips, a combination of companies that were originally headquartered in Oklahoma, have offered to take out a company in Houston for $30 billion, a company called Burlington Resources, another independent company. So I think that that's going to be the wave of the future, and we just have to hope in Oklahoma City that companies such as Chesapeake and Devon and Kerr-McGee are able to fend off those overtures, continue to be valued properly in the market, and continue to create the kind of goodwill and community giving that they do in this city.
Let's focus on the product natural gas for a minute. Yeah. You've already told us that natural gas is to some extent used to generate electricity. Right. We know it's used in heating, right, and cooling. What do you see 10 years from now as other uses potentially for natural gas?
Well, what's really going to happen, I think, is that the price is going to ration the supply, obviously, and it's going to determine where the gas goes. It's going to go to its highest and best use. Mm-hmm. It's also used in fertilizer. It's also used in all kinds of petrochemical products and plastics. Are those industries going to be able to afford natural gas if we don't find a lot more of it? Probably not. So the market, again, will be the tool that determines where the preponderance of it is used. I was looking at an article just the other day on Glenpool. This is the 100th anniversary of the finding of the Glenpool. When Tulsa became the oil capital. We flared an awful lot of natural gas because we didn't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. Well, there's an awful lot of things to do with it now, and hopefully we can be much better at finding it.
Mm-hmm. Tom, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah. Pleasure being here.
Come back.
I appreciate it a lot. Thanks.
All right. Tom Price with Chesapeake Energy is our guest. Kent and I will have a final word when we return. You're watching The Verdict.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a plug nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
The Cox Channel. More sports. More fans. cheerleaders. More fun. Nobody does more local sports, and nobody does it better.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers. We've been visiting with Tom Price of Chesapeake Energy.
Yeah, Chesapeake has made quite a footprint in northwest Oklahoma City in the 63rd Street western area. And they've obviously done it the right way, because you don't hear a lot of local cries of overreaching or anything, and they're building a beautiful campus out there. They've obviously well focused on what their mission is, and Oklahoma City, Mr. Mayor, is pretty lucky to have that kind of company as a resident. I'd
Absolutely,
say.
they're a great corporate citizen, as are a handful, or maybe more than a handful of other companies. But a lot of companies could take lessons from Chesapeake on giving back to the community.
Well, and it isn't just the company; it's their employees as well, and particularly their Tom Ward and Aubrey Mcclendon personally have done an awful lot to make a lot of people's lives in Oklahoma much better, and we're very grateful for their efforts as well. Let's talk about what we're going to do next week. Our Happy New Year show is going to be with Barry Trammell. We're going to change focus completely and go to sports and talk with one of the leading sports columnists in Oklahoma. And he'll be talking about a lot of things and kind of looking at the year back and the year forward and making some predictions, I hope.
Yeah, I think so. College football and whether or not they should determine their national champion in the manner they do is very topical right now. And of course, next week as we get into those games, it will be. And it'll be interesting to get Barry's take on that, as well as a lot of other issues. Very opinionated, very entertaining. That's going to do it for this edition of The Verdict. Be sure and join us on our website, theverdict.tv. You can go there and give us an example of a show that you'd like to see right here. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced by the Production Services Group at Cox Communications, exclusively for the Cox Channel.